when I say the church has left the building, we can no longer have a singular model for what church looks like. Every church is not going to be, one with a steeple on the top of it.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Karen Georgia, please go ahead.
I am Karen Georgia Thompson, and I serve as the General Minister and President for the United Church of Christ, which is one of the mainline denominations in the United States. This is a recent call for me in ministry. I started just a mere 21 days ago. So I am still getting acclimated. I would also say I am a poet. I am an administrator. I am a minister. And I always want to say of myself that I'm a child of the universe.
Oh, and congratulations with your new position, Karen Georgia. I mean, this is pretty special. For the listeners who are not familiar, with this world, you're the first woman that has been chosen as the president, yes. And also the first woman of African descent, right?
Yes.
So how do you feel about that?
I think I'm still wrapping my head around the enormity and the historic nature of the moment. I find, trash day is Thursdays at my house. And when I took out the trash this past Thursday, I thought to myself, there's no presidential trash person. Nothing has really changed here for the most part. But when I talk with people, there's a general excitement, which for me is where the energy around this and the understanding comes from, because clearly my life is still my life. Yeah. and the normalcy of it is what I live every day. But as I talk with people who are energized around what it means to see a woman in leadership in our denomination, which is predominantly European descendant, seeing an African descendant person. I'm also an immigrant. I was not born in this country. I'm Jamaican by birth. And so it's also the magnitude of being a person who was not born in this country and has managed to overcome, to some extent, some of the challenges that are involved with coming into another country as a teenager or whatever it is that looks like. And so I think for me, it's really wrapping my head around that and holding it, because I think it is a moment that is to be acknowledged. And so I find myself sometimes reflecting on the moment, but usually it's because somebody has put it in front of me and not because I'm taking out my trash,
Let us. I have a couple of questions about your, present position. But before we go there, you said, you're born in Jamaica. Talk us through that. So, how many years did you live there? When did you come to the States? And tell us a bit about your upbringing. And was there a moment, maybe in Jamaica, or that you thought, okay, this is the direction that I should go? I mean, you are many things, right?
Yes.
So yeah, were there moments where you thought, okay, I will be a poet, or I will become, the next president of the UCC?
Not only am I many things, I've had many lives. So in some ways, I would say where I am is a third career. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I explained to people, no, I was not a missionary, child of missionaries or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
We generationally Jamaican, you know, a descendant of enslaved people who were brought into the island. So my family migrated to the United States when I was 14 years old, but it wasn't a simple process as,
Mm.
oh, let's all pack up and leave. My father had left many years before, had migrated to the US, and as with many families who kind of go through this kind of migratory experience, you have that separation of families for an extended period of time. So my father was gone. He left like at the end of the 1960s, and then my mother left in the early part of the 70s and
Mm.
was gone for a number of years and kind of went back and forth until we were united late 70s in New York City.
Mm.
So most of my most of my formation, I would say, was in the Jamaican context. So I still have pretty vivid memories,
Mm-hmm.
and I do ground myself in my heritage and culture and understanding of myself as a Jamaican woman.
Mm.
Even though the critical places of my formation are here as a teenager, going to high school and parts of junior high, college, all of that happened in this country. And truth be told, I've lived in this country longer than I lived in Jamaica.
Mm.
But I think that there's something about our DNA and something about how we are formed around our ancestry, our heritage, our culture that doesn't shift regardless of where we live, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's important for me. I would say I can't really think of a particular time
Mm-hmm.
where, things kind of clicked for me. I When I was in high school, because I went to high school in New York, I went to Brooklyn College, to Brooklyn Tech, and
Mm-hmm.
I was an aeronautical engineering major in high school.
Really? Okay.
Really. Um, so it's one of those facts about me, when I talk about
Yeah.
my life where people go like, "What?" So yes, I was an aeronautical engineering major at Brooklyn Tech, and then I went on to Brooklyn College and did computer science. So still like in the sciences. And somewhere along the way, I decided that I did not like any of that
Mm.
and that I wanted to do something different with my life. So I switched majors and I became an English major, English
Mm.
and secondary education,
Okay.
which is what my undergraduate degree is in. I've done substitute teaching. I have never been a classroom teacher.
Mm.
So that's something of a first life. But I think that there's something about being an educator, and
Mm.
education looks different in different places, right? It's not a one thing about a classroom or the public school or anything. So I still consider myself to be an educator
Mm.
because there are multiple ways in which we educate along the way. So I've had a career in nonprofit management.
Mm-hmm.
I have a master's in public administration from North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
I did a year of public policy at Duke University. Then I went back and I got an MDiv at Union Theological in New York, and I have a doctorate of ministry from Seattle University. The thing that I would say about my multiple career paths, right, is that somehow they've all intersected in this place where I currently am,
Mm.
you know? So I have this nonprofit career. I have this career in programming in the national setting. I have a career in ministry as, a, pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things inform what I currently am. So
Mm.
I don't think there was any point where I said, I want to be this thing. I think I've followed the passions
Mm-hmm.
that I had for my life. And I think I've always been a writer. I just didn't know it was a thing. Be a poet.
Okay.
Having a gift that is around the arts is very hard to manage, because the arts are not, unless you make it big, right? It's really not a structured way of having income, right? And so I remember being in my early 20s and dreaming words at night.
Yeah.
I would sleep and I would dream whole poems. I would wake up and I would forget, but I think the words have always been a part of my life in a meaningful way.
And yeah, just a quick question. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I do.
So they all went to the States?
Yeah. So when my parents migrated, we on the my older brother was 16, my younger brother was 11, and so we all migrated together.
Okay. Yeah.
But again, my father left first, and then my mother left, and then they went through the process of filing for us as children.
And one of the reasons that I always ask this question also because I'm always curious. Okay, what is the career path of your siblings?
Yes.
Is there something similar going on, or are they totally in different directions?
Okay,
Yeah.
my siblings, my younger brother, who's the youngest of the four of us, has had a very vibrant career in computer science.
Okay.
So he was a programmer for many years. Then he left that, and now he does a lot of kind of AV and what that term gigging in the film industry. So a lot of the kind of movie sets, television sets, that kind of thing. So that's what he does. My older brother works for an airline, for one of the major airlines on the, I think now he does like freight or something like that. I'm saving my sister for last, because my sister for a while did customer service kinds of things, and then went back to school and joined the New York City Police Department, and had a 20-year career in the with the New York City Police Department, and she just retired.
Wow.
And so I would tell, when people would ask me, so do you have siblings? What do they do? And I would say this, and they'd say, well, how come your brothers ended up in like, kind of this, kind of normal work, and you and your sister ended up in these male-dominated professions, But I'm not sure how or why, but for 20 years, we've had the privilege of being able to support each other through the challenges of being in professions that tend to be white male dominated. And so that's a very interesting trivia.
Yeah, no, it is.
Trivia note.
I mean, I have two sisters and one brother, and the brothers are more in the science, NGO science, and the sisters are in the arts. So it's I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I have a question to you though. Maybe you to tickle your conscience in terms of if tomorrow your poems would become a bestseller as part of a book, and so salary wise there is no issue, would you change? Would you go full-time becoming a poet?
Yeah, I think I would.
Mhm.
Um, I enjoy writing.
Mhm.
And I think that there's something about the creative expression that is important and it balances out my life in a particular kind of way. I I have a book of poetry. It's Drums in Our Veins,
Mhm.
which I published last last year, maybe the year
Mhm.
before. I can't remember. I just finished the manuscript for so the first book of poetry is entitled Drums in Our Veins. The
Mhm.
second book of poetry, which I just finished the manuscript for, is entitled Painting Rainbows with Teardrops. And I the United Church of Christ, we have a project called Living Psalms. And Living Psalms invites creatives like myself, poets and artists of different kinds, to reinterpret the Psalms, to rewrite the Psalms from
Mhm.
a justice lens.
Mhm.
And so over the years, I've contributed to things like Living Psalms and different kinds of projects that have allowed me the opportunity to write from a different perspective,
Mhm.
and maybe even write on demand, which is a particular thing. I've served as like theological reflector for events,
Mhm.
and I find that there's something about it, about that kind of writing that that allows this part of who I am to emerge in a particular kind of way. So I'm very that there's that part of me that is very structured, that engineering side, right? Very
Mhm.
structured, very systems oriented, and then there's this very creative side.
Mhm.
And the work that I do quite often doesn't demand that kind of creativity. So I think if I had the resources and I could do anything, I'd probably be a writer
Mhm.
full time. And I have like all these writing projects that I would just really love to do because I've actually my sister's a little annoyed with me, but I've over the years I've written three novels. I've never published them.
Mhm.
And actually, all three are unfinished, which may say something about my own sense of my writing. I meaning if I don't finish them, then I don't have to publish them, right? I don't have to worry about what's going to happen with them. But my sister had surgery one year, and I
Mhm.
sent her one of these novels to um, to read,
Yeah.
and so she read, and then she called me, and she was like, "Where's the rest of it?" And I was
Yeah.
like, I just wanted to know like what you thought about it. Like, did you think it was good? She's like, well, I need to know what happened to the people. And I said, well, I haven't finished it yet. And so a few months passed and she called me and she said, I just want you to know I'm having dreams about these people and I need to know
Mhm.
what happens to their lives. So I think one day I want to go back to that kind of creative writing, which takes a different kind of focus. With a poem, for me, I think it's more of a gift for me. So when I sit down, and people compose differently, but typically, I feel more like I'm channeling when I write. Um, so especially the poetry when I write in terms of novels, it's a different kind of process, which is also different than when I write, for speaking engagements or sermons,
Mhm.
But having those spaces in my life is really a blessing to utilize the gift and to allow the gift to be a part of community.
Mhm. I heard you use the word, when you write poetry or channeling.
Yes.
Um, are you channeling when when you are preaching?
Yes. Yeah. I would say so. I think that's a classic example because as a preacher, my understanding of the preached word is that I am a conduit, right? So whether it is that I write that on paper and deliver it, right? Or more extemporaneous in the presentation, I still understand that the words that I'm speaking are being brought to the people through me, and that message is first for me.
I would like to go piggyback a little bit further on your new position. Is it for 3 years, or is it for 6 years, or for how many years is the
A term is
a
current
term?
4 years.
4 years, okay.
So I will be eligible for re-election in 2027.
Okay.
However, we just voted at our General Synod in
Yeah.
which we just had in June. We voted to move our General Synod from 2 years to 3 years,
Okay.
to every 3 years. So that will change the terms for the elected officers of the church from 4 years to 6 years. So
Okay. Wow.
so if I do a second term, it would be 6 years. So it was in the past that we were eligible to serve 3 4-year terms for a total of 12 years. Now it would be 2 6-year terms for still a total of 12 years. But for me, because I would be in this transitional phase, I would be eligible to serve a total of 10 years, 4 plus 6.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Let us, go into the future. 10 years from
Yes.
now,
Yes.
you're not eligible to be re-elected, so you have to
Yes.
move on.
Yes.
So what do you hope to have left then?
Meaning what I hope to.
Yeah, when you're done with 10 years, and what do you hope people would say about you? Oh, the last 10 years with Karen Georgia in charge,
Yeah.
this happened, and
I would hope that people would say Karen Georgia contributed to the church being a welcoming and a more open place. That Karen Georgia contributed to decolonizing the church in a meaningful way that allowed people to really hold on to their heritage, cultures, and traditions whilst being present in community and understanding the gift of God given through Jesus Christ. Tall order.
how will you go about this? Tell us one secret in terms of what
One
you're
secret.
planning.
So we often talk about diversity in the church, and I think it's challenging because diversity is actually not a singular. We have multiple diversities that are present among us. And I think quite often we overlook what it means to hold the tension of different people who have different opinions, different theologies, different backgrounds. So I think I really, at some point, would like to have a church summit. I want to call it Living Under a Big Tent, because right now I don't have a better title for it, right? And really what I want to bring the church into conversation about is what it means to have civil discourse in the midst of the diversities that we hold. Because I don't think it's something that just happens. I think it takes commitment, it takes time, and it takes intention to really live through what it means to have different opinions. I have people around me with a variety of opinions that are different from me, and they're not there because everything's easy breezy and cheesy. It's because we struggle through the differences that we have, and we don't always agree, but we've agreed to be in relationship. And so what does it mean for us to say that we understand ourselves to be communities of faith, communities that are based on love, right? And we understand as Christians that Jesus's love was a radical love, a radical call to love, and that the prophets, whether it's the prophets in the Hebrew Bible or the modern prophets that are among us, people, like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who talked about beloved community. That if we're going to be that or anything close to it, it requires that we be in intentional conversation and relationship together in ways that afford all of us to have our human rights and dignity left intact when we're done.
Karen Georgia, that this particular podcast came about. It's a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I started to do since 2012 to raise awareness and funds to end hunger, poverty, and injustice. And during COVID, I was not able to walk with others. I have to walk alone. And so I thought, okay, but I still like these conversations that I have with when I walk. So anyway, so then I started this podcast to virtually walk with people like I do with you now. But when I walk, either virtually as well as, well, it's more present when I walk in person. We talk about life. We talk about, why are we here on earth? We talk about religion and spirituality, and we talk about youth very often. And one of the conversations that come up is, the younger generation is really different. They go less to church, and some people say, no, it depends where you are. Maybe in a Western context, yes, etc., etc. My question to you around youth and spirituality and religion is, what do you see happening among youth in your community in relation to religion and spirituality?
Let me start with one of the challenges in general is the disaffiliation from that people are experiencing from religion, including Christianity. People are disaffiliating, but the interesting thing is the numbers are increasing around disaffiliation. People are disaffiliating from institution, but they're looking for ways to explore their spirituality. And I think it's interesting that people are separating the two. A lot of young people, I think, are looking beyond Christianity. There was a time when we were very monolithic, I think, about our faith. And the way I would name that is, Christians married Christians, Jews married Jews, Muslims married Muslims. If you were in a relationship with somebody across from a different faith tradition, the expectation would be that one or the other would convert and that there would be this kind of unified thing in your family, right? I don't think that's true anymore. And the data is pointing to the increase in interreligious relationships and interreligious marriages, right? If you go with those as trends, what it also means is that for our younger people, that siloed religious experience is no longer there. for most of our younger people, they are more likely to know people from other traditions in as much as they would know people from their own tradition. So I think that level of exposure has caused people to be way more expansive, like younger people to be way more expansive about their spiritual understanding. I think that there was a time when, people would say, oh, those are just young people exploring. But I think that they have used those opportunities to deepen their faith outside of traditional spaces and to ask questions and to be informed about what's going on, how, what do people do in their context, not in a way that is geared at appropriation, but in a way that is allowing them to understand the universe, the divine, God, whatever it is that we want to call source, right? To understand that in a bigger way that informs who they are. And I think that unless we in the church find different ways of engaging people around their faith, I think that there's the danger of another generation that's going to leave the church.
So what does that mean for you as the president of the United Church of Christ? Does it mean that you have to leave the building?
I think the church left the building a long time ago. And I think if we did not realize that the church had left the building, COVID certainly amplified that, right? As and I'm of the opinion that everything is not for everybody, meaning I don't think that there's a cookie cutter model for what church or worship community looks like, right? I think that there will continue to be worship communities that thrive in buildings, but we have so many models for what worship community looks like, right? It's small church, large church, storefront churches, right? It's online communities. It's communities that are in bars and coffee shops and all these things that are emerging, because I think that there's something to be said about the need for community and community as space that assists in deepening our faith and our wonder and connecting us to God. And I think, when I say the church has left the building, we can no longer have a singular model for what church looks like. Every church is not going to be, one with a steeple on the top of it. There are just so many models that are emerging. And I think that we're in a place where we need to embrace that and really think not so much about what it is that church needs to look like, but what it is that church needs to be in order to be responsive to the community.
Yeah, I told you, that I walk 100 mile in a week or 5 to 7 days to raise awareness and funds to end hunger, poverty, and injustice. If you would be asked to walk 100 mile in a week, so that means 15 to 20 miles per day, for which cause would you walk?
Let me just say this. I'm anticipating a particular question towards the end, right? So I'm conflicted with my answer, because I would say in this moment, the first thing that came to me was the refugee crisis, which is a very specific thing, but it has multiple intersectionalities, right? It's all the things that you talk about here, right? Which is the poverty, so many things. But I also think that the severity of the refugee crisis globally is lost on most of us in our day-to-day existence,
Mm.
right? I challenge people quite often, and I suggest that if they point me to an issue that they're concerned about in their neighborhoods, I could point them to a global issue that it's connected to.
Mm.
And so I think that when it comes to this challenge about the refugee crisis, it's also being fueled by the climate crisis, significantly so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Climate, war, food deserts that are emerging, lack of water, so droughts, and the list goes on, civil unrest, all these things, right, are contributing, and people's general desire, I think, to live in places where they are safe and they have the ability to flourish.
I try to lift up or to tell my listeners about the Sustainable Development Goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I do this, it relates to what you just mentioned. We have many challenges in our world. The good thing is that we did have discussions, with each other. And as a result of those discussions, we came up with, okay, we need to make our world more sustainable. And we identified 17 goals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not perfect, but it's what we have. What do you like my listeners to know about the Sustainable Development Goals?
We can all contribute to their success. I think that the thing to me about the 17 goals is their accessibility, and that you don't have to be a country or a large NGO to contribute to the goals. So whether it's things like zero hunger, you can contribute to that by simply contributing to your food pantry, the food pantry in your neighborhood, right? And I think the other thing about that I find compelling about the SDGs is the invitation to measure the impact of things that we're already doing. And you asked me about like 10 years down the road with this ministry. One of the things that I would really like to see is our congregations in the United Church of Christ intentionally documenting the impact of their ministries by identifying the sustainable development goals that are associated with the ministries that they do in their congregations.
I love that. And one of, I've been living in this country for 13, 14 years now. And what I find unfortunate is that this seems to be the only or one of the few countries where very few people know about the Sustainable Development Goals, and people are not working on it. If I go back to my own country, the Netherlands, every municipality has to report on how they are contributing. So I think that intentionality would really be helpful. And unfortunately, we are not making the progress that we should make before, those goals we need to reach before 2030. And there is a growing group of people within the world that is saying, one of the reasons that we are not making the progress outside of, climate change and wars, etc., is the fact that we did not pay proper attention, or we are not paying proper attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community, to really contribute to these processes and system changes that the Sustainable Development Goals are about. And, a survey was done, discussions were held, and then this group of people came up with the inner development goals. There are 5 inner development goals. Being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and action. And my question to you about this is, if you hear me saying this, the 5 inner development goals, maybe 2 questions. Have you heard about the inner development goals? And if not, it's not a problem at all. But have you any initial thoughts when you hear this?
So no, I've never heard about the inner development goals. I like them. So you said being, thinking, collaboration, action, and what's the fifth?
Relating.
And relating. And this makes perfect sense to me because I think that I've been thinking recently about the ways in which we live in a very siloed world. In as much as we talk about globalization and people are traveling and we're connecting, there are still ways in which we are still pretty siloed about whether it's our work, our connections with people. And again, I would say that COVID has kind of heightened that, right? So when I look at these, things like being, thinking, collaboration, action, and relating, these are very powerful ways to get us to, I think, to think beyond ourselves, right? Or beyond what it is that we think we're a part of towards something larger. And when we think about being, I think it invites us into more of a spiritual space, right? This idea of being. Being, thinking, the collaboration piece is huge in this action, which would include like advocacy and things like that. And then relating what it means for us to be in relationship together, which kind of fosters a lot of this other stuff. So I really like these. I'm going to go look it up and figure out how I could weave it into whatever the next thing is that I talk about. I like this.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. I've tried to incorporate, in workshops and also where I've spoken. I also would like to pick up to what you said around connecting, and that that we need to connect more. That's an important aspect of ultimately working together and making this world more sustainable and better for all. Yeah, that's what I hope with my podcast, that I contribute to connecting people, make people, expose people to different perspectives. Again, you don't have to agree with all the guests, but be open, listen. So yeah, relatively recently I came up with the idea of, what I should do is also connect my guests, more intentionally. So I have a question for you of a previous guest.
Question is, what do you think is the most serious challenge we have on Earth right now?
I am gonna go with the climate crisis. And this is what I was referring to when I was talking about the refugee crisis.
Yes, sure.
Because the climate crisis has produced a lot of things that is more than what we are seeing in terms of changes in the Maui fires, the recent storm off the California coast. We look at there are multiple natural disasters that are happening, and the world is pointing to climate change, the rising seawaters, all of that, right? But in places where it used to rain, it doesn't rain anymore. In places where it had a different kind of climate. So people are unable to live in certain places. I remember we visited Bangladesh a couple of years ago, and visited with partners there who are trying to deal with the salination of the soil because of rising seawaters, and they're unable to plant the things that they used to plant to sustain the community. So they're having to adapt to planting above ground, and you have acres and acres of land that are empty because they can't plant on it because the soil is too salty, and they're having to find crops that can grow in that soil. So I think for me, I think the other challenge too is how to reverse the damages that have been done as well. So this is not as easy as, oh, let's turn, flip a switch and change it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that we have moved into a cycle, and there are those who still theorize that, oh, there's really nothing going on. That's just a little bit of heavy rain, right? But it's not. And so I would point to that, and probably also name that there's a sense of urgency for more effective global response that is more coordinated, because I think, kind of everybody's doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody's doing different things. And then also, I think that there are ways in which the especially the global North communities, right, that are actually emitting, are committing a lot of, let's just say, climate crimes, right, are not willing
Mm-hmm.
to change and steer course. But where it's impacting is in developing communities, right? And that in more industrialized countries are not as responsive because they don't want to change, what they see as a way of life.
So what do you hope that UCC will start doing?
I don't know that there's anything specific that I would hope we start doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably more of a hope that we will continue being invested in the things that we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think being a part of a number of organizations that are focused on the climate crisis. Calling, we have staff who are working on the issues, but working with other staff as well. And, we sit in places like, the World Council of Churches and other spaces where very important and critical thought is being given to not just how do we educate about the climate crisis, but how do we impact and perhaps even reverse the trends that we have seen in the last few years.
Your question for the next guest.
My question for the next guest: if you could meet anyone in the world, who would you want to meet and why?
And the person needs to still be alive?
Since you asked that question, I would say anybody, whether dead or alive.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you could meet any one person, who would you want to meet and why?
Great. Yeah, Karen Georgia, I know that you find this question that I'm going to ask a difficult one, like many of my guests, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If I would ask you to mention a song or a piece of music that embodies for a big part what you are about, which song or piece of music would that be and why?
Okay, this is good. One of my favorite songs is Bob Marley's Redemption Song. As I've gotten older, I've really come to appreciate Bob Bob Marley's contributions in a significant way to actually fighting against the oppression of African descendant people. And I think Redemption Song is one of those that, you know, if you listen to it, he gives you a whole history in this one song about the plight of people, right? So, you know, it starts with, old pirates, yes, they rob I, right? Sold I to the merchant ships. That's about the enslavement, right? And then he talks about, redemption song, the songs of freedom. That's all I ever had. So it's this place of moving from, it kind of moves you through. And I think that Bob Marley's life as, people know him because he became famous, but Bob came out of the ghettos of Kingston and, was very poor. And like a lot of the singers who became popular coming out of the Jamaican context, people like Peter Tosh and, so forth, they were singing about what they knew. They were singing out against oppression. They were singing about the corruption in the government. They were singing about the colonial project that had left millions of African descendant people in the Caribbean basin, destitute, illiterate, lacking infrastructure, lacking education, so that's one of that's the one that I would identify. There are probably others, but I think that's one that I really appreciate. And when he sings about emancipate yourself from mental slavery, that's a real thing. And a lot of us still haven't gotten to a place where we can think outside the box and be critical about the systems that are in place that are oppressive, not only to ourselves, but to global communities. So I'm gonna drop that there, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Thank you for sharing that. And that, for me, it makes it full circle, bringing it to the IDGs, right? Is system changes require individual as well as community changes as well. And I love that you chose Bob Marley. It's one of my favorite artists as well from when I was, young. So for the listeners, a reminder, we made a Spotify playlist of all the songs that have been selected by my guests, and so we will add this one, and I really encourage you to check it out if you have time. I often listen to it, and of course for me it's maybe extra special because it reminds me again about the privilege of that I've had to talk with a wide range of people with different song choices as well, from classical music to Bob Marley to Rolling Stones, U2, or Mozart. Karen Georgia, I don't know if it's still going on, but at a certain moment, Steve Hartman of CBS in the US examined how one simple act of kindness creates a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have two questions to you about this, and that is, what are your thoughts about, the simple act of kindness and the potential to create a ripple effect? One, and then the second part of the question is, if I would ask you right now on the spot to commit one simple act of kindness, this week, what would you do?
Wow. First of all, I think acts of kindness should just be a part of who we are, right? You know, this extra invitation says something about how screwed up we are as a society.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if I were to do one simple act of kindness, I'm going to share one that I've done in the past.
Okay.
I was in a restaurant one day having lunch, and the people at the table next to me were very nice, and they started talking to me. And so I asked the the waitress that I had to bring me their check, and I paid their check, and paid my check and left the restaurant. So they really never had an opportunity to say thank you, but that wasn't the purpose of the exercise. I just wanted to do something, something, something nice for somebody else. Of course, this was let's just say this wasn't a high-end restaurant, and that's where I was on that day. I don't go around paying people's restaurant bills because that could get a little pricey, especially depending where you are, right? But I just think that there are little things that we can do. I think even just smiling at somebody sometimes becomes an act of kindness, a simple act of kindness. You know, sometimes I'll wait and hold the door for somebody, you know, and they seem surprised because, you know, just, and again, these are actually what we would call common courtesies that I think have, you know, have vanished from among us. But I like that personal, that, you know, kind of personal touch. And as much as I don't like surprises, I like surprising people.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. Hey, any message, a question, or invitation for the listeners?
Get involved. I think that would be my invitation. I think we have different degrees of commitments, different things that we want to see happen, but it requires that we get involved and that we move beyond ourselves in order to move the needle in our society around the things that we see. It's not enough for us to be voyeurs around injustice or to have verbal commitments that are not realized in some kind of action.
These talks always go fast, and I really like to thank you for today. I mean, we know each other for quite a long time, but I've heard things, and we talk with each other as well. So,
Yes.
but I've heard today, new things. So I that's great. So I'm sure the listeners appreciate this conversation as well. So thank you. Is there anything? Is there a question that I should have asked and I didn't?
No, I think you asked more than enough. And I thought this was good. You know, it made me think about some things that I probably don't often think about. The thing you didn't ask me to do was to read a poem, but we don't have time for that.
Oh, actually, I got a message from your church not to ask too much about your poems, because before you're writing a bestseller and you will leave, so they don't want it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, thank you so much, and I will make sure actually that the book that you did publish already, that people can find it. Now I have to. I like the title, but I have to. Drums in our veins, right?
Yes.
Wow. I have to check that out now myself, and I encourage the listeners to do the same. Thank you so much, Karen Georgia, and you know, I really believe that you were talking about the arts and science. I believe that it's and the religion. It's a dance that needs to happen. That's what I think. So in the arts, you never say good luck. You always say break your leg. So I would say break your leg,
Yeah.
because it all it's all related. So yeah, keep on doing what you do, and thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you for the invitation to be present. This was fun.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of. I wish I could do this. If people ask me, what do you want to do? Well, I would like to do this podcasting full time. So
Nice. I'll keep that in mind.
when one day when I get famous, then I will do it.
Yes. Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.